Did you ever go to the ice cream shop with your parents when you were a kid? Well, I did quite a bit, and one thing I always remembered was being overwhelmed by the varieties of colors that I saw in the ice cream case. I just couldn't decide which ice cream I wanted. There was strawberry, rainbow sherbet, blue raspberry, there was mint chocolate chip, Rocky Road, heck, even chocolate looked more interesting. But you know what flavor I never noticed when I was a kid? Vanilla. I mean, it just seems so boring. I don't know, it didn't seem like it had any flavor to it. The reason why I started this video off like this and told you this corny analogy was because I think a lot of that principle applies to a lot of things in life, more specifically to video games, right? I mean, we all jump into video games looking for the shiny, cool stuff to use, and Helldivers 2 is no different. We get all these shiny, awesome pieces of armor that are all sorts of different colors, all sorts of different shapes and sizes. But one thing that is pretty constant on all these pieces of armor is these boring vanilla armor passives. Now look, I'm not gonna sit here and say they suck or anything like that. I'm not trying to crap on these armor passives. However, when you look at them, there's nothing interesting about them in my opinion. They're all very basic in description and do very basic things. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a full overview of all these armor passives, gives my completely democratic, unbiased opinion on what all these things do, exactly how useful they are, and give them a rank based on this extra special ranking system that I've come up with. So that way you can decide whether you want to use these things or if you don't. But I'm telling you, some of these things actually do a little bit more than you think, so you want to stay tuned. Anyways, let's get into it. For the Scout Armor passive, markers placed on the map scan the area every 2 seconds, and in addition, it reduces enemy detection by 30%. Starting off with the reduced detection, 30% reduced detection is quite a lot. However, I do feel like that the community overrates this armor passive quite a bit because, I don't know, I just don't personally find it, even on level 9 difficulty, that difficult to avoid packs of enemies. I mean, I've had moments where the enemy's literally staring at me and I'm just walking by and they don't do anything because I haven't hit that detection range. So just in my overall experience while playing Helldivers 2 and not running this armor passive hardly at all, when I don't want enemies to see me, I just avoid them. It's not that difficult because they're spread out enough. And I don't know, I just feel like it's not that useful in my opinion. You're typically safe around 30 meters or so away from any enemy patrols or any enemies in the area. You can creep up to about 25 meters if you're on the side, but once you get toward the front, you'll notice that it does increase your chances of being seen quite a bit. As you can see in this patrol, they're going to start looking at me, and then next thing you know, the one in the back is going to see me and start shooting at me. In the non-armor example, you can see get about 25 meters or so. It's about the same. So, I mean, it's nothing crazy. And then right here in this clip, you can see that I get as close as 17, 18 meters. The Automoton is just literally staring at me, not doing anything for a minute. And yeah, there you go. With this clip right here, I get to about 35 meters. So it seems like it's about a 5-meter difference or so between armor on and armor off. And then right here, the bugs are just stupid as hell. I mean, I don't quite understand what they're doing here. I mean, I'm right in front of their face. It's not doing anything. So moving on to the marker thing, it seems about as useful as the marksman rifles right now in the game. So I didn't have high hopes for this. Just to be honest, placing markers on the map is just okay, but I mean, a lot of people aren't looking at it to see enemy detection, so I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's very useful. So overall for the Scout Armor passive, I would have to say that it's decent. It's better than I expected. You get about a 5-meter grace when you're running near patrols. Is nothing crazy, but again, my overall conclusion in the initial thoughts part is pretty much what I think. I can avoid enemy patrols if I really want to, and I don't really see the overall benefit of running this over a lot of other things. And then the marker thing is just absolutely useless. I don't find it useful at all. So I'm gonna have to give this armor a B tier overall. It's useful, but there's just better options in my opinion. The Fortified Armor passive reduces recoil while crouching or laying down by 30% and grants 50% resistance to explosions. Starting off with a 30% reduced recoil, that freaking sounds amazing. I mean, having more recoil control is always nice until you realize that there's a little disclaimer. you had to be crouched or laying down. And how often are you doing that in this game? I mean, if you're an MLG quickscoper and you know how to spam crouch and just do it in the fluidity of the game, sure, this is gonna be useful. But for the average John Helldiver out there, you're mostly gonna be running for your life, gunning, and not really focused on crouching and going prone. So for my testing, I decided to test the LAS Sickle, the Jar 5 Dominator, as well as the Liberator Penetrator. All of these weapons have some different varying recoils. The Sickle has the lowest recoil, the Jar 5 Dominator has a pretty high recoil, and the Penetrator is a little bit in between, so that's why I chose these options. Now what I want to do is I want to put these on screen side by side. I'm going to have one side's going to be armor on and one side's going to be armor off. I want you to take a look at this and tell me if you can tell the difference, and then I'm going to post the results at the end of each weapon test. Let's take a look. So I think you can tell by the footage that with primary weapons, it's not super noticeable. With something like the Jar 5 Dominator and even the Eruptor, it may be slightly more noticeable because they're more heavy weapons. But again, not super noticeable. Now, when you take something like the heavy machine gun, this is actually pretty useful. I mean, even the other light machine guns can benefit from it, but their recoil is significantly lower than the heavy machine gun. But again, that's really the only weapon in the game that is very much benefited by this 30% recoil. And again, in Helldivers 2, in the heat of the moment, crouching and going prone is not super useful, and since this is a heavy machine gun, you're not going to be sniping with it or something like that. So I don't know, it's just so niche that it's kind of hard for me to say that this is a super high-end benefit to this armor passive. So talking about the other part of this armor passive, again, this is a completely unbiased video, just keep that in mind. But I absolutely love the 50% armor resistance, and I run this pretty often, I'm not gonna lie. It's just very useful in all aspects of the game. Well, not against termanids, but against automatons, this thing is borderline OP, because what's our biggest enemies when fighting the automatons? Rocket people or those big laser cannons. This protects you from those. It's freaking amazing. In this first set of clips, I'm letting a rocket raider just shoot me. Now, one thing I noticed is that in these first couple of clips, the further I was away, the more damage the rocket seemed to do to me. Now in the second round of clips, you may notice that I take significantly less damage. Now I'm wondering if this is just a weird bug or if this is actually how it's supposed to be, but I figured that maybe it might not do as much damage or would do consistently the same. It's kind of odd, I don't know. So for this next round of footage, I ended up asking my buddies Coffee, Rob, and Matt to jump in and shoot me with stuff that would explode that Helldivers can use to see what would happen. I mean, I pretty much thought I was gonna die, but I'm gonna let this footage speak for itself. So I'm gonna let some stuff play, and then you guys can take a look at it, and I'll commentate in between. Okay. That didn't protect me very well.
You already did the... You already got the reinforcement ready.
Matt, do you have an EAT?
Yep.
All right. Hit me.
Let me get a shot. These drop pods are sort of annoying. Okay, right.
Oh crap! He hit me. Not in the face, in the chest. Just anything.
Going straight up mafia on you here.
It's okay.
Super mafia.
Ready to liberate.
All right, feet and path.
All right.
Do you have a stalker nest?
Okay, that's all right.
I thought I saw a stalker moving invisible. All was camouflaged.
You got evaporated.
So in summary, I understand that this is not a super scientific way to display this armor passive, but this is the best I could do. And in summary, when you get hit directly from enemies, you're probably gonna survive. When you get hit directly by your fellow Helldivers, you're probably gonna die. And splash damage in general, you'll mostly be protected for at least one explosion, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. However, it's not as S tier as I thought, but it's still really, really good. And anything that helps you survive just a little bit more against the automatons is gonna be really good to use. So in summary, for the Fortified Armor passive, the 30% recoil is a little bit of a waste. It's not the greatest thing on the planet. It's only really good for the heavy machine gun. You can notice it a bit if you're wanting to go prone with primaries, but again, you're not going to be going prone a lot in this game, so I find it not mega useful. And for the 50% explosive resistance, this is really good. It's not as clutch as I initially thought it was, but at the same time, it's still a lot better than a lot of the other armor passives. So I'm gonna have to give this an overall A tier. It's a really good armor passive. It's actually one of the best ones in the game. However, it's just not perfect. It's still really good. I wish they would replace the recoil with something a little bit more useful. But again, it's in a good place, and this is one of the best things to use against the Automatons. The Engineer Armor passive reduces recoil while crouching or laying down by 30% and increases grenade capacity by 2. Hey look, 30% recoil reduced. That's awesome. Where have I seen this before? Oh, I'm going to put as much effort into this as Arrowhead did when creating this armor passive and just say rewind to the fortified part of the video that I just talked about when I'm testing this armor passive, because I'm not going to go over this twice. Now, as for the other part of it, where you do get the increased grenade capacity by 2, this is pretty solid. I mean, that's pretty much it. Having more chances to blow crap up is pretty freaking awesome, and it provides a lot of utility. Now, this does have the side effect of making you an ammo brick hog, requiring you to steal upwards of 3 ammo bricks per resupply if you want to be that guy. But at least you're able to have more grenades, right? So that's pretty much it. The Engineer Armor passive is just a solid choice. You're not going to go wrong having more grenades. Everybody loves it. You get more stun grenades, you get more incendiary grenades, you get more impact grenades. The list goes on. You just get more grenades. It's absolutely cool to have just more things to use to blow stuff up. And crowd control. But the 30% recoil reduction, again, brings this armor passive down a bit because it's just a copy and paste from the Fortified Armor, and I wish it was maybe the throwing range increase from the Servo-Assisted. That's a hell of an idea. Why don't we have that on there? But I digress. So the Engineer Armor passive, again, is a solid armor passive. You're never going to go wrong running it, and I'm going to have to give it a solid A tier for its overall use cases because, again, having the extra grenades is always useful. The Medkit Armor passive increases stim capacity by 2 and also increases their duration by 2 seconds. All right, so now we're talking here. Unlike the Engineer Armor passive, this is not just a lazy copy and paste. I'm loving it, right? And my initial thoughts were that having 2 bonus stims is gonna be useful, especially on higher difficulties, and maybe even quite clutch. But I also had the counter thought of, I rarely find myself in a situation where I'm completely out of stims. Even on higher difficulties, I don't find myself running out of stims that often, and that's just a personal thing for me. And when I do, I typically can call that a resupply in that time frame, or I find stims on the ground on the map. So I don't know, I just don't really run out of stims that much. The other thought I had too was, just like the Engineer passive, this is gonna make you an ammo brick hog, because in order to get all of your 6 stims back, it's gonna require 3 bricks to make this happen. But I mean, you know, at least you're gonna be healthy, right? So let's jump into the second part of this armor passive, talking about the increased duration by 2 seconds. So if you didn't know this, basically when you heal yourself, if you're at 0 or very low, for example, you don't just shoot back up. You notice that your bar slowly builds up. That's a hot or a heal over time effect. And this can persist past you getting full health. And that just basically increases that effect by 2 seconds. But there's one other thing in here that you may not have noticed, because not only do you get full health, but if you're out of stamina, you shoot back up to full stamina and you have unlimited stamina as well. So that's what makes this a little bit more OP in my opinion, because your stamina bar stays full and your health bar is staying full and recovering if you're getting hit. So you can just flat out run away for significantly longer with the extra 2 seconds. So that's actually pretty awesome in my opinion. So my final thoughts for the Medkit Armor passive are, if you have a tendency to get hit a lot, this is going to be great because you get more stims, and also you get the added bonus effect of getting 2 more seconds of the heal over time and the unlimited stamina, and it's just overall very useful. However, I feel like the majority of the player base is like me, where they find utility and benefits from the other armor passives over this one, so this one's often forgotten about because it's just kind of boring. I mean, it's not the best thing on the planet, and you can get 4 stims, which is usually plenty, and they offer the same effect, so it's not like it enhances this stim and makes you more invincible or something like that. It just gives you more, which is okay, but you don't always need more health. In my opinion, you need more grenades, you need more resistance to explosive, things like that. But yeah, more health is just not really highly sought after by the player base. So I'd have to give this overall a B tier. it's decent. It's really good for players that have a tendency to get hit a lot. But if you're like me, I'm imagining you're not going to run this over a lot of other things. The Democracy Protects passive gives you 50% less chance of getting killed by lethal damage and prevents bleeding from chest hemorrhages. So let's start off with this bleeding thing. If you didn't know, you can bleed in this game. I mean, personally, I'm usually dead 98% of the time before this thing can take into effect, but it technically can happen to you, so it's nice, I guess, to prevent the bleeding. As for the 50% less chance of getting killed, I really do feel like that this is the noob player's best friend. I completely mean that respectfully. I'm not trying to just crap on newbies playing this game, but if you die a lot, this will help you die 50% less. Literally.
Okay, that worked.
Two.
Okay.
Wait for the kill over time to go away. Okay.
That one got you.
So as you can see from the footage, this is quite interesting because I did technically survive 2 lethal blows in a row. Yeah, there was a little bit of space between it, so there might be a potential cooldown on this. But from what I understand in my other testing of this and the more in-depth testing we did, I don't want to show you all the nuances of that because this was pretty spot on with what that was. And me actually using this passive actively in the field, I have survived multiple lethal blows in a row before I ended up dying. So it seems more like a random dice roll chance of when this is actually going to proc. So basically when you get hit with a lethal blow, either you're going to survive or you're not. So it doesn't really seem like a cooldown type thing. But again, that's all speculation. It's kind of difficult to test this because I can't map out every single situation where this happens, but just know that you will survive at least multiple in a row. So as for my overall thoughts on the Democracy Protects armor passive, it's about middle of the road, maybe a little bit less than that, because once you hit a certain level in the game, you get the shield backpack at level 20, and just in general, you get some other armor passives in your rotation. You're not gonna run this very often, especially as you get more progress into the game and you learn how to avoid damage just in general. You're just not going to use this as much. But early on, when you're struggling with surviving, this actually can save you, so it does have some utility there. And then the bleeding effect, I just don't feel like bleeding is that big of an issue, and usually you're dead more times than not before the bleeding effect even takes place. And if you're in an unfortunate situation where that does happen, whatever, you can just reinforce, right? So it's not that big of a use case for it. So I'd have to give this overall armor passive a C rating. It's decent when you first start playing the game. However, you'll quickly drop this for other things as you become more available. And yeah, that's just pretty much it. The extra padding armor passive increases armor rating. What did you want me to say here? It's the most basic thing on the planet. You get more armor, you can take more hits. Yay. I mean, it's not terrible, right? If you're wearing light armor, it has this extra padding on there. It bumps it up to medium armor mitigation, and you do get the same stamina benefits of wearing light armor. But again, it's pretty bland. It doesn't really do much outside of that. Yes.
100 meters.
Just one of them. Okay, go. Okay, skip. Wait.
I'm hit!
Found
My
something.
arm!
Again.
Punk bitch.
All right, so this is actually pretty fascinating. I've been trying to wrap my thoughts around this because I was not expecting these results, but it makes sense when you think about it. So in the first example where I got shot, I wanted them to only shoot me twice, and I got down to 10% health with the armor on, and then I died with the armor off, which makes a good bit of sense. So that's basically like a 25%-ish armor protection against bullets. Now, the interesting part to me was the melee part, because I went down to just about 40% health with the armor on, and then when I took the armor off and I got melee twice, I died. So the reason why I said that's interesting, because it kind of proves to me that the armor in general is built for you to take more melee damage, which I thought it would in general make you take a little bit more damage overall. So it means that armor is not useless against the bots specifically, but it's not as beneficial as it would be against the bugs. So in that situation, what I would do is I would only wear armor that has the extra padding when I'm fighting the bugs, because it's going to be able to allow me to take more melee hits when compared to using it against the bots. It seems kind of not useless, but it's not nearly as effective. So it's interesting. I mean, I was not expecting that. So it seems like the percentage varies based on what type of damage you're taking. So that's pretty interesting. But overall, my thoughts are that this armor passive is pretty vanilla. It's the most vanilla armor passive on this list. However, it does have a substantial amount of benefit when you're facing the bugs, when you're getting hit by melees. It does have a lot of extra defense for you, so that's pretty awesome. So I'm gonna have to give this armor passive a B tier. A little bit more useful than I thought. I'm honestly gonna say I was surprised at the results. But again, it's just about as vanilla as you can get. And I wish they actually gave us a percentage and told us what it was of how much armor you get, but that's good to know that it's great against the bugs. The Servo-Assisted armor passive increases throwing range by 30% and adds 50% bonus to limb health. Okay, so now, I'm not memeing. This armor passive is actually pretty interesting. I mean, on paper, it looks pretty boring like the rest, but I promise you it's not. So this armor passive suffers from one problem, and it's the fact that both of these armor passives feel like secondary armor passives. They don't feel like primary ones. Example being that the 30% extra throwing range really should be on the engineering armor passive, and I don't quite understand why they would do the copy and paste thing and not put this on there. It would have made more sense. But anyway, so the extra 30% throwing range is a bit odd, because why would you actually want this by itself if you're not going to get more grenades or something to throw with it? I have an experiment for you. Run this for a few days exclusively. Don't ever change your armor sets. Run armor sets with this 30% extra throwing range. Then after a few days, switch back to whatever armor passive you want, and I'm telling you, you will notice a serious difference, because it's going to feel like you're weenie arming all the stratagems and all the grenades.
Keep liberty.
Firing non-lethal payload.
Deploying SOS beacon.
Administering freedom.
So obviously this is not a perfect one-to-one comparison, because getting the same scenario and the same angles is pretty difficult. However, you can see that it's about between a 20 to 30 meter difference between armor on and armor off. And I think that this is actually pretty substantial, because that's the difference between you staying alive or getting your reinforcements thrown way far away, which is awesome. Because being able to throw your stratagems from a lot further away, grenades further away, and being able to throw resupplies further away, whatever, it's just very useful. It's never not going to be useful to have greater arm strength when you're throwing any of these utility items. Now to the 50% bonus health to limbs. This is a lot more useful than I thought it would be. I mean, it's again a secondary armor passive, and I guess in this case it is truly the secondary armor passive, but this could have been on something like the medkit passive. I mean, I like the medkit passive as it is because you get all those good bonuses, but it'd be nice to have that on there as well. Maybe they could do a third line to it, or a third line to all these armor passives, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. This armor passive is incredibly useful, because both of these, yes, they are secondary items that would be more useful on other armor passives to help benefit those and make those better. But for what it is, this is one of the best armor passives, if not the best armor passive in the game, just because of the utility of it. Throwing stuff farther is never going to not be useful, especially once you get used to it. And then having 50% more limb health is always never not going to be useful, because in those situations where you would break a leg or have some sort of issue, it's not going to happen as fast. So it's just really nice, and just a nice passive bonus. So I'm gonna have to rank this armor passive an S tier. It's absolutely awesome. I hope one day that maybe they bundle these into other armor passives, because they're just overall really good passives in the game. But for what it is, this armor passive is absolutely fantastic. I have no complaints. The electrical conduit armor passive provides 95% resistance to arc damage. This armor passive would be OP if arc damage was used by more than just Helldivers. I mean, no enemies in the game currently at this stage use any type of arc abilities. Dang, look, that did nothing. Do it again?
Yeah, you didn't even make like a grunt.
That's like literally doing nothing to me. So in short, yeah, 95% arc resistance is pretty awesome. It protects you from pretty much anything arc related. I mean, you can see I was basically being tickled by the arc thrower. And then the Tesla tower was not doing very much damage, but then when I took off the armor, of course it was just one-shotting me, and the arc thrower does about the same thing. So yeah, it is useful, but again, arc thrower got nerfed, so not very many people are using it, and not very many people use Tesla towers, so its usefulness is very low in my opinion. And then no enemies in the game use arc damage, so yeah, it's okay, but it's never getting used. Nobody ever wears this armor. So I'm gonna have to give it a D tier overall because it's so niche, and I have never once wanted to run this armor outside of doing it for like some test or something like that, because when people throw Tesla towers down, it's typically far away. I'm not getting hit by them, so yeah, I don't know, whatever. It's just not really super useful in my opinion. Some overall thoughts on the armor passives is still the same. These are all pretty vanilla and basic. They need to, first off, eliminate a couple and combine them, and also they just need to make gear more interesting in general. But I have no doubt that Arrowhead will figure something out eventually with these armor passives, but again, for the time being, they're pretty vanilla, and I hope the way I ranked them and explained them helps you decide which ones you want to use all the time and which ones you want to avoid. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. It's a bit long in the tooth, and I appreciate you guys watching. I hope the testing was interesting at least, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.